Welcome everyone to Rules Explained. In this episode, we're going over Metamorphosis Alpha, episode 2. I am John Merritt.
I'm Rob Nothing.
And let's see what we've got. We left off with the example of player trying to get a follower. Why?
Yes.
What does getting a follower have to do with Metamorphosis Alpha?
One of the things of early role-playing games, which has really kind of been lost, except with the most recent Essentials set for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, is the concept of the NPC hireling or the NPC henchman.
Okay, that kind of follower.
Yes, hirelings and henchmen were a huge part of the game. Hireling, like the word suggests, is somebody you hire, you go ahead and pay. A henchman is just somebody who follows you around because you're so good looking or whatever. So this is what this is right here, is the Metamorphosis Alpha suggesting only humans, which is a kind of an interesting concept, but it's their benefit for being a human, a pure-strand human rather than a mutant. One of the benefits is they're the only ones who can attract followers. So what you got to do is you got to look at your leadership potential, cross-reference it with the chart. And as you can see, there is a very small chance that you can go ahead and recruit followers, but not impossible.
Wait. Where's the chart? I see a poison chart.
Oh, go to the left. It's more of a table, I guess, on the chart.
Leadership potential, is that what it is?
Yep.
Oh, I see. And then the percentages next to it. I got you. So
exactly.
If I had a 16 leadership, I would have 50% chance of friendly mutated a friendly mutated being will follow. Yes. Another 15% chance of a friendly mutated human will follow. Oh, I see, being and then human, and then a 6% chance of a human type. No, that's wrong. Why does it say 6? And why is 6 not in a percent?
Yes, 6 is the maximum followers of the human type that you can have.
I got you.
So if you read it literally, I can have one mutated being, one mutated human, and 10 humans if my leadership potential is 17.
I got you.
And there's only a 20% chance a mutated being will follow, and a 30% chance a mutated human will follow.
So then you roll a percentile dice or something just to see if it. Okay. 1 to 30 succeeds.
And they have to be friendly if you read the syntax properly, because you just can't go up to somebody shooting at you and say, "Hi, I'm so good looking.
Be my friend. Follow me into battle." I've been wrong all these years. I need to follow this man.
Exactly. What have I done with my life?
My life has meaning now. Example of beginning players and human types. Okay, so now we're moving into examples.
Yeah, these examples are quite good. What they do is they give you 3 different ways that you can create the character. One being Scar Lock, and if the reader is careful, they'll notice Lock Scar, and then Rex Cole are variations on anagrams of the same name. But it is interesting, though, that at least they give you an idea of how to construct a character of the various types.
Okay, so how do I create a character then?
Well, you roll your 3d6 for your attributes like you normally would for just about any game of this time period. And then you go ahead and decide what you're going to be, what stock you wish. You're human, mutated humanoid, or mutated creature. And if you're going to be a mutated humanoid or a mutated creature, you're going to roll another d4 to determine how many mutations you have. And then depending on the Starship Master, they will go ahead and assign some sort of defect to you. So there's not much randomization here. You get to kind of pick your mutations. The Starship Master is going to pick your defects. There's a chart there, right, that you can see, which tells you what you can't have in combination. So if you have the taller mutation, well, you can't have the shorter mutation as well. So there's some qualifiers.
Put you back at average.
Yeah, I have 2 mutations that made me average height. So needless to say, there are some good flexibility. In fact, this game, if I can suggest this, goes into the realm of almost superhero games that would come later on, a few years later, in which you are creating your superhero by choosing superpowers, not mutations technically, I guess, but superpowers, and not randomly choosing them. Well, all apologies to Marvel superheroes.
We will get to that in a different podcast.
Yes.
So physical mutations explained. There are
Yep.
30 of them. And if we were playing Dungeon Crawl Classic, I'm sure this would be on the 30-sided die that they have.
And as a matter of fact, you could create random tables for these if you so desired. You can make that a percentile table. And if you're, with each one of these representing a 1, a 2, or a 3. So for example, if I roll a 90, that would be density control or whatever the case may be. And if I roll, anything above that, that would be player's choice. So there are ways you could make this random, because I think it should be random, because there are many mutations in here that if a player min-maxed enough, they could create one heck of a interesting mutant for certain.
Okay, so a quick question. So I rolled 3d6 for my stats. Now I have my stats. Now do I have to have mutations?
Nope, you can be a pure human, but that's not going to go ahead and get you very much, because it's actually, if you want to mutations, and if you want to go ahead and play a whacked out, wonky character, you're going to want to play one of the mutated characters. But the humans do have some advantages. So yeah, you could choose a human if you want to. Like, for example, leadership potential being one of the major advantages of being a human.
So, like, for example, it says example of being example of a beginning player character that is a mutated creature. We have his stats here. Then we have physical mutations. Are there any limitations to these? Can I take every single one of them if I want to? Can I take 4? Can I take 3?
Well, you're supposed to roll a d4, and that will determine how many of those you get.
Okay.
And probably if you choose, like, for example, the physical mutations in and of themselves aren't too horrible. Perhaps density control and shape change might be very powerful. But if you look at the mental mutations, there's a couple. There's a couple in there that are extraordinarily, shall we say, powerful, like planar travel and depth field generation and time field manipulation. So my guess is that if I'm a player and I choose that, and my Starship Master either says A, you shouldn't, and you don't agree with me, or B, allows it, the Starship Master would then assign me a defect of some tremendous weight, so that we would kind of counterbalance that particular mutation. So, for example, if I'm insisting that I want my guy to have life leech, well, perhaps I'm going to go ahead and give him, as a Starship Master, I'll give him fear impulse for flowers.
All right.
You see? So that can serve as a balance, but there's no points here. There's no balancing factor mechanically. It's just all up to the referee, the Starship Master, or the player to go ahead and determine these things.
So build a rounded character.
Yes.
So we have our physical mutations explained, our physical defects. Got a whole bunch of those.
Quite a nice variety, actually. Some of them
keeps going.
Yeah. Well, then we get plants. Plants aren't necessarily a player character choice, nor are animals, but they obviously need to have these, because we will be encountering, as we travel through the starship, we will be encountering animals that have been mutated, as well as plants that have been mutated. By the way, fantastic picture demonstrating what a Metamorphosis Alpha game is going to be. The human with
fern is attacking me.
Yeah. So yes, that shows you what it is.
So I see a robot or a cyborg, a human, Renaissance era maybe. No, I'd say 1950s Gothic science fiction.
Yep. It's kind of interesting. A lot of the humans are depicted as having advanced equipment and gear.
And plate mail.
Yeah.
That's cool. Explanation of plant mutations. The mutants.
This is your monster manual. Some of these monsters, according to some reviewers, have been lifted directly from D&D.
Really?
For example, death growth and dark fungus are basically, you can call those things from, the brown mold and green slime that you would find in Dungeons and Dragons. So some of them have criticized them for taking this a little bit too far in similarity, but if you think about it, kind of makes sense. You're going to have molds that are going to go and become very dangerous to human contact or any other race for that matter.
Right. Now we have the mutated animals. So there's a lot you can play with here.
Yeah.
Flying types, insects, plants, mutated animal, mutated human types. Creating non-player character mutations.
Here's where you can kind of randomize things and maybe use this for the player characters. When I played this game, this is exactly how I would go ahead and make the player characters to avoid the discussion / arguments.
It seems like a very rule dense game. I mean, there's a lot of rules, small fonts.
Yes,
really packed together.
You hit it right on the head, because if they would have made this in their normal font, this game would have probably tapped out at 60 some odd pages. But they wanted to go ahead and make the game fit into 48 pages, which was kind of the standard for the game books of this time period. Mm-hmm. So this is dense, but it's awesome.
Then we have our movements. Then we move into distribution of monsters, mutations, and treasure.
Here's again where you have a feeling that it's more like D&D in some ways, because we go ahead and talk about let's distribute mutants and treasure. Treasure in this case is usually artifacts that we no longer understand and need to figure out. So what you have here is on the bottom right there, devices, equipment, duels, and weapons. So as a character, you have to use your leadership potential, which is interesting because according to the letter of the law, leadership potential is the only thing you can use to decipher artifacts.
That's
which means that mutated animals and mutated humans can't understand artifacts as written. Now, there's a few things to go ahead and consider. One, the Baroid in the picture above. I love that. I love all these pictures. I'm sorry. But he's carrying, obviously, a gun. And throughout the rules, you will hear, and examples, you'll hear of animals carrying guns. So how is that possible? So what has been the default is, whoops, there was a mistake. Use your mental strength score, which is more akin to intelligence anyway.
It's like charisma finally has a purpose.
Yes. I'm so darn good looking. I know how to operate this laser gun.
Darn straight. Then we run into an encounter table. This is like another randomized thing that a GM might be able to use. Human tribal areas.
Here's where the game takes on a quality that is very different than role-playing games of the same era. We were lamenting about how Boot Hill did not go ahead and really give the owner and the referee a chance to understand what the Wild West was about. The assumption was, what the Wild West is, you can figure it out. Well, because this is such an alien setting, there's quite a bit of description here of all the different elements of how the ship operates, so that way the Starship Master can run an effective game. We ran into that in our previous recording when we talked about the character of the Starship, or the description of decks and its various artifacts. Now we have a description of what would happen as your player characters interact with human tribal areas, forested areas, the main ship's computer, and so on and so forth.
So non-player characters, healing body type, healing body damage, languages, surprise.
Yeah, languages and means of exchange. Another way of going ahead and demonstrating just how this game is going to be used in a different, very alien environment.
Never trust a Venus flytrap.
Sure.
Which they actually may have gotten from Venus. Let me see. The city.
So here we have.
Here's an example, it looks like, of a layer.
Yep. Of one of the Starship levels. This would be the city level, Epsilon City, which, by the way, they turned into a huge, massive Kickstarter campaign and created the actual complete layout and description of the Epsilon City, which is available somewhere if you can find it on Amazon. But anyway, So they did this, and on the next page, you'll see they did a forested section. So that way the referee can see, okay, this is how I can create my starship. And that was the essence of it. This is a sample. You need to create your own starship. How does your starship look? What is the shape of your starship? I mean, we gave you general parameters earlier, but you can go ahead and populate and create the decks to look the way you want them to look.
Use your
So in
imagination.
essence, what you have is a dungeon crawl in space, if you run it that way.
Multiple levels.
Yes.
So example of a modular dwelling diagram.
Cross-section of the starship itself.
With the one propulsion engine in the back.
Well, if you look at the picture, there's a few of them, but it's a profile.
Yeah. So here we have a character sheet. Very basic by today's standards. Looks like typed on a typewriter.
Yes. If you want to scroll back down to cross section, I have one little issue I want to go and bring up to the listener.
One?
Yes.
Okay.
According to the cross section, the decks start at 1 and go down to 17. And if I remember correctly, and I believe I do, deck 17 is the engineering section where you find all of the parts and power systems that keep the ship going. Now, if you take a look at the cross section, that doesn't seem to go ahead and make much sense, okay? Because the engines are on the top level. So what I always did, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there for anybody to make comments about, is I just reversed it, much like a building would be. Level 1 was on the bottom of the ship, and as you ascended in the ship, the levels got higher. So level 17 would be the engineering deck, is where you would find the engines, in theory. So I'll let everybody else hopefully make comments about that, but that is my solution to what seemed to be a slightly illogical issue.
Makes sense. So here we have our human character sheet, our mutant character sheets.
And another fine illustration there. I want to say that's Sutherland again. Most of the work in here was Sutherland's, I guess.
I don't see a signature. Movement tables.
Now you get the perforated table, so you can take them out. This is way before referee screens, and you can take this out and you can go ahead and use it as a reference as you're playing the game. So you have to keep flipping through the rulebook.
The hit or miss charts. I don't know. I don't think we've ever gone over combat.
We kind of glossed over it, but the essence of combat is this. You have a hit or miss chart, and your chances to hit are not based on anything else really except the weapon you're using. So the weapon class gets cross-referenced with the armor class, and that becomes your chance to hit on a D20. D20 usually.
Oh, okay.
Some people have interpreted this as needing a 3D6 chart, which is an interesting interpretation because that's how the third edition of the game and the fourth edition of the game work, is that they use 3D6s to determine if you hit or not. But I think most people who play D&D just assumed it was a D20. And as a matter of fact, it says it right there, random number from 1 to 20. But I have seen people talk about this was intended to be a 3D6 chart. But that would make it extremely difficult to hit people in armor class 1.
Yeah, no kidding.
And then when you do score a hit, you roll your damage according to the weapon and the target. So depending on the target, that will go ahead and determine how much damage is done to you, which is kind of interesting because the poor true human, who doesn't really have much to begin with, is the one getting most of the damage from these weapons.
Wow.
Very interesting.
It's different. It is interesting. The official errata sheet.
Yep.
We made mistakes.
We had a few issues. They forgot to put in some of the descriptions of the equipment. They also forgot to go ahead and clarify some of the mutations. So you have quite a good errata there that helps go ahead and alleviate those issues.
We move into the weapons and combats. Revised charts. We got credits. The Awakening. Is this like a beginning adventure?
Now, yes, if I can interject real fast, the errata and the Awakening scenario here were added later because Metamorphosis Alpha had kind of a resurgence over the last few years, and there was a reprint of the rules, and there have been several other reprints and supplements and Kickstarters around this game. So none of this was present for the first edition of the game. So we're seeing stuff here that was added by James Ward after the fact.
Okay. We have our famous hexagon for creating your own ship.
This right here is an advertisement for the 4th edition of the game.
Wow.
And then we have the back cover for the original edition. And again, the art is outstanding. No one's going to convince me that the art today is better just because it looks nice.
No, it's very retro, which is very cool.
Yes.
Any other comments?
No, I think we went over this as quickly as we could, because that's what we do here at Rules Explained. We want to just go ahead and throw out ideas and insights and just personal opinions. I think this game has potential beyond its premise. Beg your pardon for my hesitation. Its premise seems to go ahead and limit you to a starship, but if you go ahead and think to yourself, what is a 50-mile long starship and what kind of systems would it have? So you got tunnels, you got subsystems, you got power generation stations, you got all sorts of opportunities to adventure on this ship, including how strange would it be? In fact, I had this done once. The group was exploring what was called in-between decks, and they opened a hatch. And what they did not realize, because they were having trouble wrapping their heads around this, was that the hatch they opened was actually the ceiling to the deck below. So they opened it up and they were looking down, several thousand feet onto the deck below, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. They thought it was a portal to another world or whatever. So there are so many wonderful things you can spring on your players if they don't know the premise. And if they do, you make them clones in some sort of cryogenic bank, and you say, you guys know you're on a starship, but you have no idea anything else. Go try to save the ship.
And that'll be a podcast for another day.
Yep.
So with that, I think that's going to close up Metamorphosis Alpha. Again, you can always find us on the podcasts, on iTunes, Spotify. We're on YouTube. By all means, email us at rulesexplained@gmail.com. I am John Merritt.
I'm Rob Nothing.
And thank you for listening.
Adios.